All right, our favorite national pastime is here. Football season is here. I was in Ann Arbor yesterday watching my Wolverines. I used to go to the University of Michigan. We're awful, by the way. Anyway, that's pretty much in the bag. Today, the NFL season begins. All right, and this means daily fantasy sports. And anytime you listen to the radio or podcast or watch the news or watch ESPN, Fox Sports, whatever your favorite sports station is, you're going to see something about DraftKings or FanDuel. Basically these are places that people can choose lineups and then enter contests. Now, this is not any longer a small thing for people who do not know, right? This is a big deal. Take a look here. FanDuel. 2.7 million people have won $4.5 billion in payments. Here's DraftKings. 850,000 people have won $7 billion in payments. This is now a business. This is actually a business. And the point of today is that has attracted professionals into the scene. Okay. And it reminds me a lot of the fact in financial planning matters, all the sorts of the way that people absorb financial information, very, very similar. Let's take a quick look. So, the fact of the matter is that, when I listen to all these, and I listen to it just for sport, pun intended, right? And you can go, if you go to Apple Podcasts, after I get done, thinking through people's financial plans, et cetera, I listen to sports podcasts a lot. And if you type in, daily fantasy sports, you will see a ton of podcasts on here. Okay. And it struck me to compare, well, how do people who don't understand financial planning, you kind of know, you've heard little things, you've heard snippets, the difference between that and the similarities between the way that people get their information and make decisions in daily fantasy as well as financial planning. Let's take a quick look. So, amateurs, I'm like everyone else, right? I watch ESPN. I watch Fox Sports. I don't watch Fox Sports as much, but I watch ESPN for the highlights. And then of course there's, NFL Daily or College Football Today. You're watching your favorite team, you're following your favorite player, et cetera, et cetera. You're getting specific information about a single line item as a fragment, as a special, simple thing. Well, who's playing who today? Well, tonight, Steelers are playing the Patriots. We already know the story. Antonio Brown, blah, 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 blah. Steelers never beat the Patriots. We all know this. But this is very similar to the way that people get their financial information. Very similar. And that is okay. That is okay, except for the fact that it's a fragment. And this is the way that amateurs, everyday people deal with things in sports, as well as getting the information. And maybe that's just a reflection of our society. Okay. But the differences here can be seen in the way that people are dealing with daily fantasy, right? Like I said, professionals are now involved. They're dealing with these things: analysis, statistics. You'll see and you'll hear of this, that, when people are playing daily fantasy sports, you've got all these contests. Let's just take a quick look, right? You've got all these contests. Look how many contests today. 20,000 contests a day are running on DraftKings. Okay. However, the professionals, they're using multi-entries, multiple lineups per contest. This looks very different than taking one fantasy, lineup for $3. Okay. And not only that, but if you watch and actually listen to what these professionals say, they're talking about things about variance. They're talking about high variance players, low variance players, high variance situations, and expected results, or EV. Okay, and you'll hear this information. You hear this information because in daily fantasy sports, the people who are actually making the most amount of money are ones who are doing this. Not I found my, not what we're doing here. Oh, follow my favorite team or my favorite player, or my very one specific line item as a fragment. That is not what the professionals are doing here at all. And in the same way, that's the way that people are dealing with their individual financial matters, which is entirely different than the way the professionals look. Let's just keep going, and you'll see the analogy. So, I don't play in these leagues, et cetera, but it's fun just to see how they work. And so what I did here is I just created my own portfolio and of players. And you can see you get a lineup and you've got to choose a quarterback. And I chose, this quarterback and these 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, the tight end, a flex player, and defense. You have to fit within a budget. Okay, you get a fixed number of dollars, and these people are assigned different prices, right? It's kind of, do you remember Price is Right? You've got to buy X number of stuff, and then you have to fit inside your budget for the contest. Okay, so again, if you go to your daily fantasy podcast, and we're not going to, I don't understand what a lot of the stuff they're talking about. I don't know why, what 10-man or, 10 formation, 11 formation, whatever this stuff is that you football geeks like to talk about. But what you end up having here is you'll have a recommendation on a portfolio of players. And you can see, again, this is not any longer child's play. Let's see here. So this is a website, rotogrindwriters.com. It's a subscription website, by the way, and you can see what you can do. You've got your pool. You can see how much the salary is. Remember, I was telling you that each player has a price and you have to fit it within a budget. You can see how complicated it is. You can build rules. You can manage entries. Watch this. Okay, if you want to manage all and take a look at what experts are projecting and statistics, et cetera, yeah, you can access it. But then you have these projections and a subscription site. Guess where you get lots of other information when it comes to financial matters? Okay. And I just went onto Google here. I said, am I diversified in my portfolio? And you can see it. And now out come all the different vendors, providers of this type of, and building a portfolio. You're building a portfolio here, diversified, et cetera. You're building a lineup here. Okay, so you can see, right, you've got a bunch of different individual fragments, and yet you are trying to build a combination just like this. And in the same way, financial planning is very similar, right? I have my income, I've got my home, I have my cash on hand, I have my 401k, I have my IRA, I have my Roth IRA, for example. You remember on this, you're talking about this, and what ends up happening is you'll see is that people are choosing situations that they can get, if someone has a great game, McCaffrey, right? So McCaffrey plays for the Carolina Panthers. Many people know this if you follow football. High usage player, he can just go off. Well, he's more expensive. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to get, if this guy hits a career day, to get big differences from the expected. So we already know he's a good player, blah, blah, blah. That's what, the experts say. That's this dash line, his expected value, high. But then we also want some chance, even if it's not great, right? For him to just go off and have some crazy day, 4-touchdown day, for example. Well, guess what? This same graph, this exact same graph, sits here on other videos here on my channel. The same thing, right? In other words, what I did in these two videos is I compared different results, 2 different days. You can know that in financial markets in August, very volatile, even though the market on average, the average here didn't look, it looked like the red line. If you just took a snapshot from August 1 to August 31st, it didn't seem very volatile. However, for people who looked inside every day, you saw something that looked a lot more like the blue line, meaning that you varied away from this dashed line more violently on more days in August than we have had in, a year. And that with headlines, that corresponded with, big headline items. So what the daily fantasy people are doing is they're taking a look at this lineup, right, to try to see where their expected is going to be and trying to get the fact that have some great day, and then they can win the contest, right? Well, in much the same way, what we're trying to do here is we're saying, okay, here's your portfolio of financial holdings. What happens when something in the world occurs? And on the one on the left here is that, look, stocks went higher. How did our portfolio perform? And it wasn't necessarily that instructive just to say, okay, it's higher and yes, I'm higher. But now then the question is you need to see what happens on the downside. Meaning that, okay, let's stretch the rubber band the other way. Now, how did we perform? That is identical, really quite identical to the idea of building this lineup, and you will hear it. And today, I released this today because of the fact that you've got all of these podcasts and different types of broadcasts, and it looks like fun or just leisure, right? It looks like leisure. But the reality is professionals now involved, right? Professionals doing this, and not just casually, watching ESPN for 5 minutes and hearing some fragment to just hear, oh, well, somebody's playing against a bad defense. He should be able to pick them apart. That in isolation, just not that helpful. Not when you're comparing yourself to the world of professionals who are running these sites, right? Who are running these advice sites, right? That's the real thing over here, right? And I haven't even, well, I'm not a subscriber, and nor have I scrolled down. Look at all this stuff. I don't even know what this stuff is, And these are other. Oh, let's see, projected ownership percentage, right? So that they're trying to figure out what are they trying to do? I'll show you what they're trying to do. They're trying to get out here so that they can win the contest. That's what its advice is for. That's what they're doing on these sites. In much the same way, these videos are trying to say, look, professionals are taking a look at your portfolio, your financial holdings in this way when something changes. Stunning is the very similar technique, very similar. And it's also it gives you a very good insight on the difference between what everyday people do, amateurs, and what professionals do. Because in those videos that on the portfolio, here's what I was measuring. I was measuring this pie and how it did in up and down. Okay. In the same way, daily fantasy, what they're doing is they're building a lineup and trying to build a lineup to try to get to see how they're going to do in much the same way the pie would work. So it looks like a totally different topic. Sports, nothing like finance. But the reality is that the analysis and actually the math of what they're actually doing, very, very similar. Very similar. What's the takeaway to you? Okay. And you can see it now. We digest sound bites. I watch ESPN for 5 minutes. And some of you have watched this video to this point because you understand daily fantasy sports and you'd hope to get some advice on, who the lineup for today is going to be, starting in like 5 minutes if it's not already started. Some other of you are financial experts. You understand things like the efficient frontier, which is a very technical term from the world of finance. And you also understand the breakdown of the efficient frontier. But professionals understand a number of different things, and you'll hear it on the fantasy sports or whatever it is, your fantasy teams. Number one, projections can be wrong. Someone can have a bad year. No one predicted the 10-year yield from the Wall Street Journal would be at this level, not even anywhere close to this level. In daily fantasy, you can see it. Multiple entries. You don't hear somebody say, "Oh, I entered one daily fantasy lineup." That the professionals don't do this, right? There are many lineups, many. In the same way, you don't see the financial persons just simply presume that, okay, I have a projection. That projection is going to be right in every instance. No, there's still randomness involved. So, in the Southeast, right, we have a hurricane. We've just had a hurricane. We've had this cone, this idea of cone, right? And, it could hit there, but it could hit there, right? Why is there a cone? Because there is a central projection of where it goes. That doesn't make it certain. That doesn't mean it's a slam dunk to follow that direct path. How's it different than any of this stuff that we're mentioning right here today? Nothing, right? It's not like the meteorologists created these models out of a Cracker Jack box, right? They're highly educated, no question about that, right? In the same way here, these daily fantasy professionals, they're statistics majors. They're statistics using computing power, right? I've shown you over here on these videos in a very simple way on how you can measure your financial holdings, right? Which is very different from coffee hour at McDonald's and, my friend had a stock tip, or getting a stock tip from your taxi cab driver. Okay? Everyday people. I know it's convenient in financial matters. I want to set it and forget it. I get this on Medicare all the time, right? People on this channel, go and see the other videos. I'm quoted in the national press on Medicare matters. I know it's comfortable. People want to set their insurance and they want to keep it there forever. And then they're focused on the result. And the quote you hear, and this is the wrong-minded quote of everyday people. See, it worked, therefore I was right. It worked out, I was right. That's not the evidence. That's not the evidence. In much the same way, you can hear on daily fantasy, they're setting lineups, right? They're setting lineups on opportunities. And you'll see this. And I remember this from a podcast I listened to the other day, right? When they were choosing a wide receiver. They want the ball thrown to the wide receiver. That doesn't guarantee that the wide receiver is going to catch it every time for a completion. Exactly. Right? Everyday people are looking at the results. Professionals in that daily fantasy example, they were looking at the opportunity, the probability of success. Very different. Professionals, adjust. You had some fundamental projection in your lineup, in your portfolio, in your plan. Something changes. Guess what? If the quarterback gets hurt, you don't choose that wide receiver because you got a bad backup quarterback. He's got no one to throw you the ball. Look, if you've lost your employment or they've reduced or radically changed your retirement health benefit, you just don't keep it there. Something has changed. You've got to adjust. Professionals, they don't simply look at the end result as evidence of I'm right, because they acknowledge that random stuff occurs. They are focused on the process and the analysis, not the outcome. It is my key, one of my absolute key starting points of financial advice to anyone. When anyone comes to us as a client, right? In other words, we are going to focus on planning on a process and to understand the outcome and whether or not the process was right, and not solely look at the outcome. Okay. The bottom line here, everyday people, of which I am when it comes to observing sports. I'm going to be watching. The reason this video is being sent out somewhere in early afternoon on Sunday is because I'm about to be like every other tens of millions of Americans, sitting watching football for the next 6 hours, 7 hours, maybe even more than 7 hours. But the point is that everyday people behavior doesn't look like professional behavior. Very, very different. You don't have getting your stock tip, your insurance advice from the person at McDonald's or from your taxi cab driver. You don't get your daily fantasy actual expertise from your soundbite on ESPN. Why? Because they're much more complicated. There's measurement and analysis involved. Hopefully you got something from today's video. I'm Jay. Talk to you the next time.